It's Britney, bitch.
Basically, a mockumentary is any fiction film that mocks documentaries. And not mock as in to make fun of necessarily, but mock as in mimic, as in to resemble documentary filmmaking. From there, a mockumentary can be anything. Most are comedies, but they can just as easily be romance, horror, drama, any genre you can conjure. Mockumentaries can be gritty takes on reality, or they can embrace the fantastical, or sometimes they're just silly buffoonery. Some of them will obviously be fictional stories, others might even fool the audience into thinking they're real, and yet others manage to fool the people who appear in them into thinking it's real. With subjects as varied as its forms, mockumentary is one of the most diverse cinematic genres. But at its heart, mockumentary really is a genre that just turns a camera on our obsession with turning a camera on things. It's about seeking the truth, and it's about media. To discuss mockumentary, we need to first discuss its twin, documentary. So, documentary is a type of filmmaking that basically claims to be depicting reality, an unmediated reality, showing an objective view of the human condition, the truth. And because of this claim that it's depicting the objective truth, documentaries kind of hold a privileged place in our society. And they tend to use a lexicon of techniques and conventions that are almost unique to that documentary form. And so, because of this inherent association between these specific codes, conventions, and techniques, and the privileged art of documentary, these techniques, codes, and conventions have come themselves to be signifiers of truth or reality. Basically, audiences have been brainwashed by big cinema into subconsciously thinking a shaky camera and a newsreel reporter means that they are watching some sort of reality. So mockumentaries, which are of course mimicking documentaries, will use pretty much the same codes, conventions, and techniques as documentaries themselves. So some common filmic conventions of mockumentaries include shaky handheld cameras, dramatic zooms, and random movement, giving an unrehearsed feel and adding to the veracity of a shot. Editing and shot setups will often be simple, cameras will be kept at eye line, and wide shots are often used to make recordings appear less mediated. And because the cameras are diegetic, only moments where the camera could realistically be present can be shot. To maintain this realism, scenes will often be framed from awkward angles or private moments shot through doors. Lighting, of course, is also diegetic, and so scenes are often lit only with what could realistically be there, which can lead to uneven lighting, but also some unconventional and creative choices in that department. More particular to the really documentary aspect are conventions like using archival footage, where historical footage or images of people and events will be used to illustrate the story. In some cases, mockumentaries will use actual real archival documents in the narrative. Others will also use real images or footage, but present them really out of context or doctor them to make them represent something else. And yet others will create entirely new images or footage, but using the technology and style of the historical era they claim to represent to create this new content. Whichever technique they do, using archival footage really gives historical weight to this fake narrative and further blurs the line between fantasy and fact. Narrators, hosts, or expositional text are also often used to add gravitas and also as a way to guide you through the narrative and provide exposition. Interviews are another bread and butter of the documentary and therefore the mockumentary. Interviews with characters are often used to give insight to their actions and lives, whilst interviews with experts or eyewitnesses will give authority to events portrayed in the film. The final mockumentary convention that is key to creating this sense of realism and reality lies in the dialogue and acting. Many mockumentaries will use an off-the-cuff style of dialogue. Acting is normally naturalistic with awkward pausings, stumblings, ums and ahs kept in to make the scene and the moment feel as spontaneous as possible.
Eric Stumpy Joe.
Childs. And what happened to Stumpy Joe?
Well, it's not a very pleasant story, but he died, he choked on, the official explanation was he choked on vomit.
was actually
Passed away.
was actually someone else's vomit. It's not.
Exactly.
You know, there's no real.
Well, they can't
Yeah,
prove
it's not-
whose vomit it was. They don't have
No,
facilities in
there's
Scotland
no
Yard
way of
to
You
print
can't
spectrum
really
photographing.
dust for vomit.
Mockumentary and documentary historically are a bit of a chicken and an egg situation. There is plenty of debate about which really came first, considering the amount of fakery inherent in a lot of early documentaries. But what really defines a mockumentary is the awareness of the filmmaker that they are creating a fictional story. The closest thing to an original mockumentary might just be a pseudo-documentary by Spanish director Luis Brunel, which claimed to depict the lives of the people of the Las Herdes region in Spain.
Until very recently, bread was unknown to the Hudanos. The bread these children are eating was given to them at school. The master usually makes them eat it in front of him, for fear that it be taken away from them by their half-starved parents.
This film has a complicated relationship with the truth and was promoted as a documentary and still kind of is classified as one, but many sequences are hyperbolic and obviously faked. Like this goat that apparently just fell off this cliff, but you can see it was obviously shot. Perhaps a more definitive opening to the mockumentary genre's embracing of pure fiction in a traditionally factual form might not actually be found in cinema, but in a 1938 radio play, War of the Worlds by Orson Welles. The play tells the story of a Martian invasion, but using all the elements of a traditional news broadcast story. And at the time of broadcast, many people who missed the disclaimer at the start thought there actually was a Martian invasion because the play used the techniques of radio news so well, and audiences at the time had no precedent for these factual conventions being used creatively to tell fiction. This fooling of the audience appeared again on television in 1957 on April Fool's Day when the BBC played a 3-minute news story on the spaghetti harvest in Switzerland. Like with Orson Welles' play, the filmmakers were clearly aware that this was fiction, but the audience trusted the conventions of cinematic truth-telling so much that people started writing in asking how to grow spaghetti trees.
Another reason why this may be a bumper year lies in the virtual disappearance of the spaghetti weevil.
Apart from hoaxes and these dodgy documentaries, the 30s, 40s and 50s didn't really yield any true mockumentaries, and this was in part due to the state of documentary at the time, which was mostly propaganda, and also the equipment was still very large, bulky and expensive. And so it was really the development of smaller handheld cameras in the 1960s that actually revolutionized both the documentary genre and then consequently the mockumentary genre, helping it become more mainstream. So in the 1960s, a new form of documentary emerged out of France called cinema verite. It used handheld cameras to follow around real people and to exist in real events in a way that was less obtrusive than previous documentaries, allowing for the propagation of more intimate, true stories. An early example of the mockumentary reaction to this is in the 1973 short film No Lies. Filmed in the style of cinema verite, it's basically a film about this guy filming his friend getting ready for a night out, only for her to reveal that she was recently raped. The film is bleak, naturalistic, and it's easy to get sucked into the film's authenticity.
I'll go with that. Do you know that you want me to go?
I'd like company. I'd like company to walk with me. Is that okay?
It's only the film's end credits that reveal that it's actually a fictional story. But while No Lies mimics cinema verite's style for emotional effect, other films mimic that style in order to critique it. In particular, Shirley Clarke's 1961 film The Connection, which was based on a play of the same name and tells the story of a bunch of filmmakers trying to make a film in the style of cinema verite about a bunch of junkies waiting for the dealer. It was made in explicit reaction to Clarke's frustration with cinema verite's claim to unmediated reality. Clarke didn't believe a film could achieve clinical objectivity when the subjects are aware they're being filmed, and this film is one of the first uses of the mockumentary genre to really interrogate the intentions of filmmakers and the relationship between a distant director and their scrutinized subject. From the late 60s, mockumentaries became more mainstream. Woody Allen released his first mockumentary, Take the Money and Run, in 1969, and went on to create many more famous mockumentaries, including Zelig in 1983. Mockumentaries began to appear on television with TV specials like Pat Paulson for President, Monty Python was doing mockumentaries, and MASH did a mockumentary episode called The Interview in 1976. But it was 1984's This Is Spinal Tap, directed by Rob Reiner, that is really considered the seminal mockumentary and the film that placed the genre into the mainstream. The film follows the antics of British heavy metal / hard rock band Spinal Tap on their US tour of 1982. It's not the first mockumentary to satirise the music industry, with predecessors such as The Ruttles, All You Need Is Cash, which is kind of like a Monty Python sketch, but a documentary about the Beatles. But it was the first to really combine all the elements we now classically associate with mockumentary. The archival footage, the sit-down interviews with the characters, intercut with handheld footage documenting slice-of-life realism, and the director being both this objective filmmaker and a character in their own right. It took all these elements and just turned them up to 11.
The numbers all go to 11. Look, right across the board. 11, 11,
and most of
11,
the amps go up to 10.
Exactly.
Does that mean it's louder? Is it any louder?
Well, it's one louder, isn't it? It's not 10. You see, most blokes, be playing at 10. You're on 10 here, all the way up, all the way up,
Yeah.
all the way up. You're on 10 on your guitar. Where can you go from there? Where?
I don't know.
Nowhere, exactly. What we do is if we need that extra push over the cliff, you know what we do?
Put it up to 11.
11, exactly. One louder.
Why don't you just make 10 louder and make 10 be the top number and make that a little louder?
These go to 11.
The film was fully improvised around a loose outline, and the plot is less important here than the painting of a character portrait of this band. Spinal Tap's influences can be clearly seen in many later mockumentaries, particularly in the rockumentary subgenre, including films like Fear of a Black Hat.
Do you know the caliber of all these guns?
Yeah, this one here is for little motherfuckers, this one here is for a couple more motherfuckers, and this here is for big motherfuckers.
Which is about a rap group. Or CB4, also about a rap group. Get Ready to Be Boys Voiced, about a boy band. It's All Gone Pete Tong, about a DJ. Or my personal favourite, Pop Star Never Stopping, about a very humble pop star. There's literally so many of these. And Spinal Tap's own Christopher Guest has gone on to become a legend in the mockumentary genre himself, creating many kind of formulaic mockumentaries about a group of people who are a bit weird.
We both love soup.
And they have a bit of a weird passion.
Mascots, they don't die. They just hang in a closet.
Yeah, because it's an outfit.
It is, it's an outfit.
And there's like a competition coming up for that passion, and so they have to prepare themselves, and it's basically the same plot over and over again with these different groups. But it's not just the films about pop stars and rock stars that you see Spinal Tap's influence in. From Kenny, a film about a toilet cleaner, to What We Do in the Shadows, a film about vampires, or Tour de Pharmacy, a film about doping and cycling. All of these have clearly been influenced by Spinal Tap's character-driven comedic style. So since the 80s, there's been a steady explosion in mockumentaries. At this point, if you can imagine a subject, there's probably already been a mockumentary made for it. Since the late 90s and early 2000s, there's also been a proliferation of TV mockumentaries like Trailer Park Boys, The Office, Summer Heights High, People Just Do Nothing, The Samaritans, and the television version of What We Do in the Shadows. The majority of these have been comedies, but as I've said, mockumentary isn't just comedy. It's a genre rife with the potential for diversity, and there have been mockumentaries in all sorts of other genres too. In particular, there's been a recent mockumentary horror trend with films like Noroi, Long Pigs, Lake Mungo, or The Tunnel using the form to great effect. But across all of this, there's one very special aspect that is unique to mockumentary that I want to briefly discuss. The thing about mockumentary that makes it special is that it only exists within our interactions and understandings of media. Cultural historian Thomas Doherty called it a soothing genre because it repaid the modern audience's knowledge of media conventions with a sense of superiority for their understanding of how the genre plays with screen tropes. Miranda Campbell's essay really explores this idea of the mockumentary repaying the Western televisual scholar's media savviness in her essay on Borat, but I think mockumentary can be a really disturbing genre too, when it, like the aforementioned 1961 film The Connection, or No Lies, reflects on the actions and purpose of the filmmaker. And one film that stood out to me for its demonstration of the potential of mockumentaries amongst all of the films that I watched wasn't a comedy. It was a 2016 Hindi film called Autohead, directed by Rohit Mittal. The film is about an auto driver in Mumbai who becomes a serial killer, but the film is really about the documentary crew. The director, Rohit Mittal, spoke about the genre of mockumentary in an interview in 2016, saying, "It's an interesting format. It's more real than a natural form because the camera itself is a character and at the same time it's mocking reality. There's a direct involvement of the camera in the story. At the same time, it questions the intent of the filmmakers or the camera or the eye through which you see the film. In a very generic way, it questions media and imagery in everyday life. In some ways, it is anti-filmmaking or a criticism on filmmaking." He said that he wanted to question the filmmakers who make films about social issues, documentary or fiction.
तुमको क्या लग रहा है कि हमको समझ में नहीं आता है? हम चूतिए हैं।
क्या?
तुम लोग साला ये सिनेमा बनाओगे और हमारा गरीबी दिखाओगे और दुनिया बदल जाएगा, सब एकदम सही हो जाएगा। चूतिया बना रहे हो तुम। सच बात काहे नहीं बोल रहे हो कि साला इसको दिखा करके तुम लोग पैसा कमाओगे, सब नाम कमाओगे।
तुम्हारा दिमाग सही नहीं है, तुम पता नहीं क्या बोल रहे हो।
अच्छा।
It's a powerful statement on representation and media, and one which mockumentary is best poised to make. In conclusion, mockumentary is a diverse genre, and it's an important response to the supposedly truthful documentary. It's accessible, and it's an important part of our cultural conversation, and for that reason I think it will continue to be relevant for as long as its twin documentary is.